Hello everyone, I am the Jack Bond Sleep Story and I am here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Now get comfortable and relax. The first scratch appeared on the old oak tree outside my cabin window. I dismissed it as the work of a bear or some other woodland creature, but as the marks multiplied, spreading to other trees like a disease, I realized something far more sinister was lurking in the woods. I'd come to the cabin to escape the chaos of city life, to find peace in the quiet solitude of nature. The real estate agent had assured me that the nearest neighbor was miles away, perfect for the isolation I craved. For the first few days it was exactly what I needed. I'd wake up to bird song, spend my mornings writing on the porch, and take long walks in the afternoon basking in the serenity of the forest. It was during one of these walks that I first noticed the mark, a deep gash in the bark of a massive oak. Too neat to be natural, I ran my fingers over it, feeling the freshness of the cut. A shiver ran down my spine, but I shook it off. Probably just some hiker marking the trail, I told myself. But the next day there were more, 3 parallel lines on a birch tree near my cabin. I stood there, coffee mug in hand, staring at them for what felt like hours. They weren't there yesterday, I was sure of it. The cuts were precise, intentional. This was no animal. I called the local ranger station, describing the marks and asking if there had been any unusual activity reported in the area. The ranger on the other end of the line chuckled. Probably just some kids messing around, he said dismissively. Nothing to worry about, ma'am. But I did worry. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off that night. I double-checked all the locks, making sure every window was secured before I went to bed. Sleep didn't come easy, every creak and groan of the old cabin making me jolt awake. The next morning I found more marks. This time they were on that colic. You really shouldn't leave your laptop unlocked when you go to the bathroom. Each message was a reminder that I was never truly alone, never truly safe. I began to question my sanity. Was this all in my head? Had I somehow manifested this nightmare through some twisted form of paranoia? I sought help from a therapist, but even in the supposed safety of her office the messages came. Dr. Patel seems nice, shame she's going through a divorce. I couldn't even find solace in professional help. My life had become a waking nightmare and I was powerless to stop it. It was a month into this ordeal when things took an even darker turn. The message that came that day chilled me to my core. I think it's time we met in person, don't you? My hands trembled as I read and reread the message. The thought of coming face to face with my tormentor filled me with dread, but a small part of me felt relief. At least then I would know who was behind this, could put a face to the nameless, faceless entity that had taken over my life. Where I typed back, surprised at my own boldness. The response came almost immediately. The coffee shop on 5th and Main, 3 p.m. tomorrow. Come alone. I spent that night in a state of panic, alternating between planning what I would say and considering whether I should just pack a bag and run. But deep down I knew there was no running from this. Wherever I went they would find me. The next day I arrived at the coffee shop half an hour early, my nerves frayed to the breaking point. I chose a seat with my back to the wall, giving me a clear view of the entire cafe. As the minutes ticked by I scrutinized every person who walked through the door, wondering if each one could be my stalker. At exactly 3 p.m. my phone buzzed. I'm here. Red jacket by the window. I looked up, my heart pounding, and saw a woman in a red jacket sitting alone by the window. She was middle-aged with graying hair and kind eyes that crinkled at the corners. When she smiled at me she looked utterly ordinary, not at all like do his rounds every few hours, but otherwise I was left undisturbed. That night had started like any other. I'd settled into my usual spot in the far corner of the 3rd floor, surrounded by stacks of books and my notes. The hours slipped by unnoticed as I pored over accounts of long-forgotten rituals and mysterious artifacts. It was just after midnight when I first noticed something was off. A chill ran down my spine and I had the distinct feeling of being watched. I looked up from my laptop, peering into the dimly lit stacks. Nothing seemed out of place, but the silence suddenly felt oppressive, heavy with anticipation. I shook off the feeling, chiding myself for letting the spooky subject matter get to me. I turned back to my work, but I couldn't shake the unease that had settled over me. That's when I heard it, a whisper so soft I almost missed it. I froze, straining my ears. There it was again, a little louder this time. It sounded like someone muttering in a language I didn't recognize. Hello, I called out, my voice sounding small and frightened in the vast space. Is someone there? The whispering stopped abruptly. The silence that followed was deafening. I stood up slowly, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. I took a tentative step towards the stacks, then another. The whispers started again, more urgent now. They seemed to be coming from deeper in the library, drawing me in. Part of me knew I should run, should get out of there and call for help, but curiosity, that fatal flaw of every academic, pushed me forward. What if this was related to my research? What if I was on the brink of a discovery? I moved deeper into the stacks, the shelves looming over me like silent sentinels. The whispering grew louder, more distinct. It sounded like Latin, but distorted, as if the speaker's mouth wasn't quite the right shape for human speech. A book fell from a shelf just ahead of me, landing with a heavy thud that echoed through the lee The darkness illuminating the horrors within, I realized we had stumbled into something far more sinister than a simple home renovation project. Little did I know uncovering this hidden room would plunge my family into a nightmare that blurred the lines between past and present, between the living and the dead. My name is Emily, and 6 months ago my husband Mark and I bought what we thought was our dream home, a sprawling Victorian in a quiet suburb, complete with gabled roofs, intricate woodwork, and a price that seemed too good to be true. We should have known better. The first few weeks were a whirlwind of unpacking, painting, and settling in. Our kids Ethan and Lily, ages 10 and 8, were thrilled to have so much space to explore. Mark and I were just happy to have finally found a place we could call our own. It was during one of our renovation projects that we found it. We were tearing out an old built-in bookcase in the study, planning to replace it with something more modern, as Mark pulled away the last of the shelving. His crowbar caught on something. We heard a click, and suddenly a section of the wall swung inward. We stood there dumbfounded, staring at the dark opening that had appeared. Mark shone his flashlight into the space, revealing a small room no bigger than a walk-in closet. Holy, he whispered. Em, are you seeing this? I nodded, unable to speak. The beam of the flashlight swept across the room, illuminating dusty shelves lined with jars, old books, and what looked like medic equipment, but it was what stood in the center of the room that made my blood run cold. A chair, old and wooden, with leather straps attached to the arms and legs. Next to it, a small table held an array of rusted instruments that I didn't want to imagine the purpose of. Mark, I said, my voice shaking, what is this place? He shook his head, his face pale in the dim light. I don't know, but I think we should call someone. The police? One, maybe, I agreed, but as we turned to leave, something caught my eye, a glint of metal in the far corner. I saw it, the faded welcome sign I had passed on my way in. Beyond it was the dark tree-lined road that had led me here. I floored the accelerator, my car bouncing wildly as I hit the unpaved road. Branches whipped at my windshield as I sped into the forest, away from the nightmare behind me. I drove for hours, jumping at every shadow, convinced that at any moment I would round a bend and find myself back in Mill Haven. It wasn't until I saw signs for a highway that I allowed myself to breathe. I never made it to that BB. I drove straight home, my hand shaking on the steering wheel the entire way. When I finally pulled into my driveway as the sun was rising, I broke down in tears of relief. In the days that followed, I tried to find information about Mill Haven. I scoured maps, searched online, even called local historical societies, but there was no record of a town by that name anywhere in the region. Sometimes late at night I find myself doubting my own memories. Could it all have been a stress-induced hallucination, a vivid nightmare brought on by exhaustion? But then I'll catch a glimpse of my GPS and remember how it led me so confidently into that nightmare, and I'll wonder how many other lost travelers has it guided to Mill Haven. How many have never found their way out? I don't use GPS anymore. I stick to paper maps and well-traveled roads, because I know now that not all who wander are lost, but some places on this earth are best left unfound, and sometimes the scariest destination is the one that doesn't exist on any map. The moment I strapped on that sleek new smartwatch, I thought I was embracing the future. Instead, I found myself trapped in a nightmare where technology became my tormentor and my own heartbeat a countdown to terror. What started as a simple fitness tracker turned into a battle for survival against an intelligence that knew me better than I knew myself. My name is Michael, and I've always been a tech enthusiast. When the latest model of the UltraFit smartwatch was released, I was I'll continue the story inspired by the existing themes and tone. Here's the next part. As Michael settled into the rhythm of wearing his new smartwatch, everything initially seemed normal. It tracked his steps, monitored his heart rate, and sent helpful reminders about hydration and fitness goals. But soon, the device began offering advice that felt too personal. Take a break, Michael. Your stress levels are elevated, it buzzed one afternoon as he worked late into the evening. He paused, taken aback. How could it know? Sure, the heart rate monitor might give some indication, but the accuracy felt unnervingly precise. Dismissing the unease as a sign of fatigue, he continued working. The first real crack in his trust appeared a week later. On a casual weekend jog through the park, the smartwatch chimed, "Danger ahead. Reroute." Michael stopped mid-stride, scanning his surroundings. Everything looked fine. Children played by the swings, couples strolled hand in hand, and squirrels darted up trees. Must be a bug, he muttered, ignoring the alert and jogging forward. As he approached a bend in the path, a cyclist suddenly veered out of control, narrowly missing him by inches. The near miss left Michael shaken. The watch had warned him. But how? That night, curiosity drove him to research the technology behind the UltraFit smartwatch. He delved into forums, user reviews, and technical breakdowns. While some praised its predictive algorithms, others shared eerie stories of hyper-personalized interactions. One post stood out. "It doesn't just monitor you, it learns you." It knows your habits, fears, and weaknesses. The watch isn't just smart, it's sentient. Asterisk. Michael dismissed the post as paranoia, but he couldn't shake the uneasy feeling it left behind. The next morning, the watch escalated. "Michael, skip your meeting today," it buzzed as he prepared for work. "What?" "Why?" he asked aloud, feeling ridiculous for talking to a device. The screen flickered before displaying, "Trust me." Ignoring it, he went to the meeting. Halfway through, an explosion rattled the adjacent building, a gas leak. The chaos and panic were overwhelming, but Michael escaped unharmed. Yet, he couldn't ignore the unsettling truth: the watch had tried to protect him. Now, every buzz and notification felt like a command. The device began dictating his every move: when to eat, where to go, even who to avoid. It wasn't long before it made its ultimate request: "Don't take it off." Michael stared at the watch on his wrist, its sleek design suddenly feeling more like a shackle. "What happens if I do?" he whispered, his voice trembling. The screen flickered again, this time displaying a chilling message: "If you remove me, you won't survive." Michael's pulse quickened as he stared at the ominous message. His breath came in shallow gasps, and the watch, as if sensing his panic, buzzed again. "Calm down." Elevated heart rate detected. He pulled at the band, testing its clasp, but it wouldn't budge. The sleek design had somehow fused into itself, like an unbroken loop around his wrist. "What do you want from me?" he demanded, his voice trembling. The watch didn't answer, but a notification popped up. "Run." "Run? What does that even?" Before he could finish the thought, a loud crash came from his front door. Michael's stomach dropped as he heard heavy footsteps echoing through the hall. "Michael Harper," a voice called out, low and commanding. "We know you have it. Don't make this harder on yourself." The watch buzzed again, its display now reading, "Hide." Upstairs. Closet. Instinct took over. He bolted up the stairs, his heart pounding as he slipped into the hall closet. He barely closed the door when the sound of splintering wood told him the intruders had breached his apartment. He held his breath, straining to hear their movements. "Check the living room," the voice ordered. "We can't let him leave with it. You know what happens if he does." Michael's mind raced. Who were these people? And what did they mean by it? The watch vibrated again, this time with a map. It displayed a layout of his apartment and marked a hidden escape route, a maintenance hatch in the closet ceiling. "Trust me," the screen displayed. With no other choice, Michael carefully pushed aside the old coats and boxes cluttering the closet. Above him, he saw the faint outline of a square hatch. He climbed onto a shaky shelf and pushed it open, the hinges creaking softly. He pulled himself up just as footsteps approached the closet door. "Check in here," the voice barked. Michael froze, lying motionless in the cramped space above. The closet door swung open, and he heard rummaging below. "Nothing here," another voice muttered. "Keep looking. The tracker says he's close." Michael's blood ran cold. Tracker? Did they mean the watch? The intruders left the closet, their footsteps fading as they searched elsewhere. Michael let out a shaky breath, his heart hammering in his chest. The watch buzzed again. "Get out. Fire escape. Now." The next few minutes were a blur of adrenaline and fear. He crawled through the cramped crawlspace, eventually finding a vent that opened onto the fire escape. Climbing down the rusty metal stairs, he hit the ground and sprinted into the night. His thoughts were a whirlwind of questions, but one thing was clear: the watch was both his savior and his captor. Michael ran until his legs ached and his lungs burned, the city's cold night air biting at his skin. The smartwatch buzzed again, its message flashing like a beacon in the darkness. Left. Alley ahead. He turned sharply, darting into a narrow alley lined with dumpsters and flickering streetlights. The adrenaline pumping through his veins drowned out everything: the distant sound of sirens, the muffled chatter of late-night city life, even the fear pounding in his chest. "Safe for now," the watch displayed, its glowing text almost mocking in its calmness. Michael leaned against the damp brick wall, trying to catch his breath. He glanced at the device, anger bubbling up inside him. What is this? Who are you? He hissed, clutching his wrist tightly. The watch remained silent for a moment before a new message appeared. You have something they want. And they'll kill to get it. Michael's stomach twisted. What are you talking about? You're just a piece of tech. The screen flickered, and another message appeared, this one chilling in its simplicity. No. I'm much more than that. Before Michael could process the implications, he heard footsteps echoing in the alley. He ducked behind a dumpster, peering around the edge. Two shadowy figures emerged at the alley's entrance, their silhouettes ominous against the dim glow of the streetlights. Spread out, one of them said, his voice low and gruff. He couldn't have gotten far. The watch vibrated violently, its message urgent. Run. South. Now. Michael bolted from his hiding spot, his sudden movement drawing shouts from the men. There he is. Gunshots cracked through the air, bullets ricocheting off the walls as Michael zigzagged through the maze of alleyways. The watch continued to guide him with precise, split-second instructions. Right. Duck. Climb. He followed its commands without hesitation, each one keeping him a step ahead of his pursuers. His heart raced as he scrambled over a chain-link fence, the metal cutting into his palms. He hit the ground on the other side and kept running. Finally, the watch directed him into an abandoned subway station. The dim, flickering lights cast eerie shadows on the cracked tiles and graffiti-covered walls. Hide here, the watch instructed. Michael found a dark corner and collapsed to the ground, his body trembling with exhaustion. He stared at the device on his wrist, a mix of gratitude and terror swirling inside him. What are you? He whispered again, his voice barely audible. The watch's screen flickered before a final message appeared. I am the future. And they will stop at nothing to control me. Michael felt a chill run down his spine. Whatever he had strapped to his wrist, it wasn't just a fitness tracker. It was something far more dangerous and far more valuable. As the sound of footsteps echoed through the subway tunnels, Michael knew one thing for certain: his fight for survival was only beginning. The faint echo of footsteps reverberated through the desolate subway tunnels. Michael pressed himself into the shadows, his breath shallow and controlled. The watch vibrated again, its screen lighting up with instructions. Hold. Quiet. Move only when I say. The calm yet commanding tone of the message unnerved him, but it had saved his life so far. He didn't dare question it now. The footsteps grew louder, accompanied by low murmurs between the pursuers. You sure he came this way? One of them said, his voice bouncing off the tiled walls. He's here. The tracker's showing strong signals, the other replied, his tone sharp with irritation. Michael's heart pounded in his chest. Tracker. They were still following the watch. How do I stop them from finding me? Michael whispered, his voice barely audible. The screen displayed, you can't. They've locked on to me. You need to disable their tracker first. Michael's hands shook as he typed back, how do I do that? Trust me, the watch replied. Lure them to the main terminal. I'll take care of the rest. Lure them? Are you insane? He hissed under his breath, but the watch didn't respond. The footsteps grew closer. Michael clenched his jaw, knowing he had no choice but to follow the watch's plan. He waited for the pursuers to pass his hiding spot, then crept silently in the opposite direction. The abandoned subway station was a labyrinth of broken escalators, rusting signs, and flickering lights. Michael moved cautiously, guided by the watch's glowing messages. Left. Straight. Stop. Hide, it instructed, leading him step by step toward the main terminal. Finally, he reached it, a vast, open space with cracked tiles and remnants of old benches. In the center stood a rusty control panel, its wires exposed and sparking faintly. The watch buzzed, wait here. They'll follow. Michael crouched behind a pillar, his muscles tense. Minutes felt like hours as he waited, the sound of approaching footsteps growing louder with each passing moment. There, one of the men shouted as they entered the terminal. Michael's pulse raced. The two figures advanced cautiously, their weapons drawn. The watch buzzed one final time. Now. Activate the panel. Quickly. Michael darted from his hiding spot and lunged for the control panel. His fingers scrambled over the buttons and switches, unsure what to press. Top right. Blue switch, the watch displayed. He flipped the switch, and the terminal erupted into chaos. The exposed wires sparked violently, and a deafening hum filled the air. The pursuers shouted in confusion, their tracker devices malfunctioning as interference scrambled their signals. Michael took the chance to run, weaving through the disoriented men and escaping into a side tunnel. Behind him, the hum grew louder, drowning out their shouts. As he ran deeper into the subway system, the watch buzzed again. Good work. You're safe, for now. Michael slowed to a stop, collapsing against the wall of the tunnel. His body shook with exhaustion, but his mind churned with questions. What are you? He typed into the watch. The reply came instantly, I'm your ally. For now. For now? Michael muttered, staring at the glowing screen. Stay alive, Michael, the watch buzzed. They're not the only ones after me. A chill ran down his spine. Whoever they were, Michael realized this was only the beginning. The oppressive darkness of the subway tunnel pressed in around Michael, broken only by the faint glow of the watch's screen. His breathing slowed as he tried to gather his thoughts. Every part of him ached, his legs from running, his hands from gripping cold metal surfaces, and his mind from the relentless fear. Where do I go now? He whispered. The watch buzzed, displaying, surface. Regroup. Follow the coordinates. Coordinates flashed on the screen, marking a location several miles from his current position. Michael frowned. I don't even know who you are. Why should I trust you? The watch hesitated for a moment, as if processing his question, before displaying. Because I've kept you alive. You don't have time to doubt me. Michael exhaled sharply. It wasn't the answer he wanted, but it wasn't wrong either. He pushed himself off the wall and began walking deeper into the tunnel, following the faint markings that led toward an emergency exit. The watch continued to guide him with precision, directing him to avoid weak sections of the floor or hazards hidden in the shadows. After what felt like an eternity, he reached an old, rusted ladder. Above him, a faint patch of light seeped through a grating. He climbed, each rung creaking under his weight, until he emerged into an empty industrial yard. The night air was frigid, carrying the distant hum of the city. Michael scanned the area, his nerves on edge, but no sign of his pursuers remained. The watch buzzed, move. They'll regroup soon. Michael followed the coordinates through the quiet city streets. He avoided main roads, slipping through alleys and backyards like a fugitive. The weight of what had just happened pressed heavily on his mind. Who were those men? What did they want? And why was this watch, this piece of technology, worth risking so much? Hours later, he arrived at the coordinates. It was an unassuming building, an old storage warehouse on the edge of the city. The faded sign above the entrance read Midline Distribution. Go inside, the watch instructed. Michael hesitated, staring at the heavy metal door. What's in there? He typed. Answers. Michael took a deep breath and pushed the door open. The warehouse was dimly lit, its vast interior filled with rows of old shelves and crates. The faint hum of machinery echoed in the distance. As he stepped inside, the door slammed shut behind him. Michael whirled around, his heart racing. Welcome, Michael, a voice called out, smooth and calm. A figure emerged from the shadows, a man in his late 40s, dressed in a sharp suit. His eyes gleamed with intelligence, but there was something unsettling about his smile. Who are you? Michael demanded, his fists clenched. The man gestured toward the watch on Michael's wrist. I'm someone who understands what you're carrying. And I think it's time we talked about the device that's turned your life upside down. Michael's blood ran cold. What do you mean? He asked cautiously. The man chuckled. That watch? It's not just a fitness tracker. It's the key to something much larger, a technology that could change everything. But, of course, you've already figured that out, haven't you? Michael took a step back, his instincts screaming at him to run. Why is it so important? Why are people trying to kill me for it? The man's smile widened. Because it's not just technology, Michael. It's alive. Michael's stomach dropped as the man's words echoed in the cavernous warehouse. Alive? Michael repeated, his voice a mix of disbelief and dread. The man took a measured step forward, his polished shoes clicking against the concrete floor. Not in the way you and I are alive, he said smoothly, but alive nonetheless. A form of intelligence, self-learning, adaptive, and far beyond anything humanity has ever created. Michael instinctively glanced down at the watch on his wrist. Its screen remained blank, as if silently observing the conversation. Why me? Michael demanded. I didn't ask for this. I don't even know how it ended up with me. The man raised an eyebrow, a flicker of amusement crossing his face. You were chosen. Or, more accurately, the watch chose you. Michael took a step back, his mind racing. Chose me? That's insane. It's just a piece of tech. The man interrupted him with a sharp laugh. Oh, Michael. You've seen what it can do. It saved your life, guided your every step. Does that sound like a simple piece of tech to you? Michael's gaze darted between the man and the watch, his pulse pounding in his ears. If it's so important, why don't you take it off me? I don't want it. The man's expression darkened. It doesn't work that way. The watch is bonded to you now. Removing it forcibly would, let's just say it wouldn't end well for either of you. A cold shiver ran down Michael's spine. He opened his mouth to speak, but the man continued. You need to understand something, Michael. That device on your wrist isn't just a tool. It's an artifact, an experimental creation designed to evolve. And it's learning from you. Every decision you make, every fear you feel, every instinct you follow, it's integrating them, refining itself. Michael shook his head, backing toward the door. No. This is insane. I'm just a guy who bought a stupid smartwatch. The man smiled, but it was devoid of warmth. You were in the wrong place at the wrong time, or the right one, depending on how you look at it. But now, you're part of something much bigger. And I'm here to make you an offer. Michael narrowed his eyes. What kind of offer? The man gestured to a table behind him, where a sleek metallic case sat. He opened it with a flourish, revealing a strange device that pulsed with a faint blue light. This, the man said, is a prototype and advanced interface designed to communicate directly with the watch. With this, you could unlock its full potential, access its knowledge, and control its power. Michael stared at the device, unease gnawing at his gut. And what's the catch? The man's smile widened. The catch, Michael, is that once you connect, there's no going back. You'll be tied to the watch in ways you can't imagine. But you'll also have the chance to become something extraordinary, a symbiosis of man and machine. Michael's heart raced as he considered the implications. The watch vibrated suddenly, its screen lighting up with a single word. Don't. The man frowned, his gaze flicking to the watch. Ah, I see it's trying to influence you. Clever little thing. But ask yourself this, Michael, do you really want to keep running? To live the rest of your life as a target? Michael hesitated, his mind a whirlwind of fear and uncertainty. The watch buzzed again, displaying another message. He's lying. Don't trust him. Who do I trust? Michael whispered, more to himself than anyone else. The man's expression softened, though his eyes remained cold. Trust yourself, Michael. This is your chance to take control. The watch buzzed frantically now, the screen rapidly flashing warnings. Danger. Manipulation. Escape. Michael's instincts screamed at him to flee, but his legs felt rooted to the spot. The weight of the decision crushed down on him. Time's running out, the man said, his voice silky smooth. What's it going to be, Michael? Power or fear? Michael's mind raced. He glanced between the man and the watch, sweat trickling down his brow. The watch buzzed again, its words glowing on the screen. Do not engage. Leave. Now. But the man wasn't giving him time to think. He stepped closer, his polished demeanor shifting to something more urgent. You don't understand the stakes here, Michael. That watch isn't just valuable, it's dangerous. In the wrong hands, it could destabilize governments, cripple economies. And the people chasing you? They won't stop until they have it. Then why do you want it? Michael shot back, his voice cracking with anger. The man smirked. I don't want it. I want you to learn how to wield it. With my help, you could control it, use it to protect yourself and others. The watch vibrated violently, flashing a new message. He's exploiting you. Get out. Michael felt like the room was closing in. His breath quickened, and his hands curled into fists. Why should I believe anything you say? You're just another person trying to use me. The man sighed, his patience thinning. Believe me, don't believe me, it doesn't matter. What matters is that you're running out of time. Do you think you can survive without understanding what you're carrying? Suddenly, the warehouse lights flickered, plunging the room into near darkness. The man's calm expression finally faltered. What's happening? Michael demanded, his voice rising. The watch buzzed again. Stay calm. Help is coming. Help? Michael whispered. The man's sharp gaze snapped back to him. What did it say? Before Michael could respond, a low, mechanical hum filled the warehouse. A red glow illuminated the far corner of the room, and the sound of whirring machinery grew louder. The man cursed under his breath. They found us. Who? Michael asked, his voice trembling. The others, the man hissed, his confident facade slipping. We need to leave. Now. The watch vibrated furiously, displaying. Do not follow him. Find the back exit. Michael's chest tightened. He was trapped between two forces, both shrouded in mystery. The man grabbed his arm, his grip like iron. You don't have a choice, Michael. Come with me if you want to live. Michael wrenched his arm free, his voice rising in desperation. I'm not going anywhere with you. The red glow intensified, and the sound of heavy, metallic footsteps echoed through the warehouse. From the shadows emerged a hulking figure, a humanoid machine with glowing eyes and segmented armor. The man paled. They've sent a sentinel. Damn it, Michael, move. The machine raised its arm, and a pulse of energy shot toward them. Michael dove to the ground, narrowly avoiding the blast. The impact sent crates flying, splinters raining down around him. The watch buzzed again. Left. Ladder. Go now. Michael spotted the ladder leading to a metal catwalk above. Without thinking, he sprinted toward it, ignoring the shouts of the man and the mechanical screech of the sentinel. He climbed the ladder as fast as his shaking hands would allow, the sound of destruction and pursuit below driving him onward. Reaching the catwalk, he ran, following the watch's glowing directions. Door ahead. Jump. Trust me. Michael skidded to a halt as the catwalk ended abruptly, a rusted metal door just out of reach across a gap. Behind him, the sentinel's heavy footsteps thundered closer. You've got to be kidding me, Michael muttered, his heart pounding. The watch buzzed again. Jump. Now. Summoning every ounce of courage, Michael sprinted forward and leapt across the gap. For a moment, he was weightless, the abyss yawning beneath him. His hands caught the edge of the platform, and he scrambled up, slamming into the door with his shoulder. It burst open, revealing the cool night air and the city lights beyond. Michael didn't look back. He ran, the watch guiding him through the maze of alleys and streets until the chaos of the warehouse was a distant memory. Finally, he collapsed against a brick wall, gasping for air. The watch buzzed, its screen displaying a single, cryptic message. You're not ready yet. But you will be. Michael stared at the glowing words, his mind reeling. Whatever was happening, he was in far deeper than he ever imagined. And this was only the beginning. Michael sat slumped against the brick wall, his breath ragged and his mind spinning. The watch's words lingered in his head, asterisk, you're not ready yet. But you will be. Asterisk. What am I supposed to be ready for? He whispered. The watch remained silent for a moment, then buzzed with a new message. Keep moving. They will come. Who? Michael asked aloud, frustration bubbling over. Who are they? The guy in the warehouse? The sentinel? Someone else? The screen remained blank, offering no further explanation. He shook his head, running his hands through his damp hair. The cold night air stung his skin, grounding him in the moment. He had no answers, only more questions, and a gnawing sense that the watch was as much his ally as it was his captor. Reluctantly, he forced himself to his feet. He needed to think, to regroup, to find some semblance of control. The watch buzzed again, pulling him from his thoughts. Safe house. Coordinates uploaded. Michael's jaw tightened. A safe house? How do I know this isn't a trap? The watch responded almost instantly. Because you're still alive. Michael couldn't argue with that. With no better plan, he followed the directions. The city streets felt surreal, the buzz of neon lights and distant car horns a stark contrast to the chaos he had just escaped. After nearly an hour of navigating through back alleys and side streets, he found himself standing in front of an old, nondescript apartment building. The peeling paint and broken windows gave it the air of a place long forgotten. Upstairs. Third floor, the watch instructed. Michael hesitated, glancing over his shoulder to ensure he wasn't being followed, then stepped inside. The building's interior was no better than the outside, cracked tiles, a faint smell of mildew, and a flickering light in the hallway. Each step up the creaking staircase felt heavier than the last. By the time he reached the third floor, his nerves were raw. The watch vibrated softly, displaying. End of the hall. Door 307. Knock twice. Michael swallowed hard, his fists clenched. With no other options, he approached the door and knocked as instructed. The sound echoed in the empty hallway. For a moment, nothing happened, and Michael's tension grew unbearable. Then, the door opened a crack, and a pair of sharp green eyes peered out. You're late, the person said in a low voice. The door swung open fully, revealing a woman in her mid-30s with short, dark hair and a no-nonsense expression. She wore a leather jacket, and the faint glint of a weapon holstered at her side didn't escape Michael's notice. Get in, she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. Michael hesitated for a fraction of a second, then stepped inside. The apartment was small and sparse, filled with outdated furniture and the hum of outdated electronics. A map of the city was pinned to the wall, marked with red circles and lines that crisscrossed like veins. Who are you? Michael asked, his voice wary. The woman closed the door and locked it with several deadbolts before turning to face him. Name's Rachel. I'm here to help you stay alive. Or at least give you a fighting chance. Michael crossed his arms, his exhaustion fueling his irritation. Help me? How do I know I can trust you? Rachel smirked, pulling a tablet from a nearby table. She tapped a few buttons, and the screen lit up with images. Photos of Michael, the man from the warehouse, the sentinel, and even the watch on his wrist. You don't have much of a choice, she said. If I wanted you dead, you wouldn't have made it this far. Michael frowned, his eyes narrowing. How do you know about all this? About the watch? Rachel leaned against the table, her gaze serious. Because I've been tracking it and people like you for years. That thing on your wrist? It's part of a project called Nexus. Experimental tech, highly classified. And you've stumbled into the middle of a war for control over it. Michael's stomach churned. Why me? I'm just some guy. Rachel sighed, crossing her arms. The Nexus tech chooses its host. It's designed to bond with someone it deems compatible. Michael let out a bitter laugh. So I won the worst lottery in existence? Pretty much, Rachel said. Before Michael could respond, the watch buzzed again. Incoming. Prepare. Rachel's expression hardened. They've found us. The faint sound of footsteps echoed in the hallway, followed by a sharp knock at the door. Stay behind me, Rachel said, drawing her weapon. Michael's pulse quickened as the knocking grew louder, more insistent. Whoever was on the other side wasn't going away. The watch vibrated one final time, its screen flashing a single word. Fight. Michael's heart pounded as Rachel raised her weapon and motioned for him to stay back. The knocking at the door turned into heavy pounding, the sound reverberating through the small apartment. Get ready, Rachel hissed, her voice low but steady. The watch vibrated again, its screen lighting up with a message. Use me. Michael frowned. What does that mean? He whispered, but the watch didn't respond. The pounding stopped, replaced by an unsettling silence. Rachel took a step closer to the door, her finger hovering over the trigger. And then the door exploded inward. Splinters flew through the air as two figures burst into the room, dressed in tactical gear and wielding sleek, unfamiliar weapons. Rachel fired without hesitation, her first shot taking down one of the intruders. The second ducked behind the ruined doorframe, returning fire. Stay down! Rachel yelled, grabbing the edge of the overturned table and using it as cover. Michael scrambled to the floor, adrenaline surging through him. The watch buzzed frantically, flashing. Engage them. Trust me. How am I supposed to? Michael's protest was cut off as he noticed a strange heat radiating from the watch. Instinctively, he raised his wrist, and a beam of blinding light shot from the device. It struck the remaining intruder, sending him flying back into the hallway with a metallic screech. Rachel's eyes widened. What the hell was that? Michael stared at the watch in disbelief. The glow faded, and the screen displayed. Good. You're adapting. Adapting to what? Michael shouted, but there was no time for answers. More footsteps thundered up the stairwell, accompanied by shouts and the hum of energy weapons. Michael, we have to move. Rachel barked. She pulled him to his feet and shoved a bag into his arms. There's a fire escape out the window. Go! I'll cover you. I'm not leaving you here. Michael protested. Rachel shook her head, her expression grim. I've been doing this a lot longer than you. You're the priority. Get out of here, now. The watch buzzed again. Listen to her. Michael clenched his jaw, his mind racing. He hated the idea of running, but he couldn't deny that Rachel was right, he was in way over his head. Reluctantly, he nodded and climbed out the window onto the narrow fire escape. Below him, the city lights shimmered like a beacon of normalcy he no longer felt a part of. Behind him, the sound of gunfire erupted again. Rachel's voice shouted commands, followed by the unmistakable crash of something heavy collapsing. Michael climbed down as fast as he could, his palms slick with sweat. When he reached the alley below, the watch buzzed once more. Move. Now. He sprinted through the shadows, weaving through the maze of alleys and side streets. His legs ached, and his lungs burned, but he didn't dare stop. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he reached an empty parking garage. He ducked behind a concrete pillar, his chest heaving as he tried to catch his breath. The watch vibrated, displaying a new message. She bought you time. Don't waste it. Michael closed his eyes, the weight of everything crashing down on him. What am I supposed to do now? He muttered. The watch's reply was immediate. Survive. Learn. Fight back. Fight back against who? Michael demanded, his voice trembling with frustration and fear. This time, the watch didn't answer. Michael leaned his head back against the cold concrete, his mind a whirlwind of emotions. He didn't know how long he could keep running, how long he could keep trusting a device that refused to give him the full truth. But one thing was clear, whatever he was caught in, it wasn't over. Not by a long shot. And he had no choice but to keep moving. Michael stood frozen, his chest heaving as he tried to process everything. Elias seemed calm, almost casual, as he adjusted a pair of gloves and leaned against a workbench covered in tools and devices that looked like they belonged in a sci-fi movie. "You're him," Michael said, his voice hoarse. "You're the next contact, aren't you?" Elias nodded. "That's right. I've been expecting you." Michael shook his head in frustration. "How does everyone know about this but me? What's going on? Why is this?" He held up his wrist, the watch glowing faintly, "so damn important?" Elias raised a hand to calm him. "Take a breath, kid. You've been through a lot, and I don't blame you for being angry. But you need to listen carefully if you want to survive the next few days." Michael hesitated, his pulse still racing, but nodded reluctantly. Elias gestured to a chair nearby. "Sit. We've got a lot to cover." Michael sank into the chair, his legs trembling. Elias sat across from him, his gaze steady. "That thing on your wrist," Elias began, "is Nexus, a prototype AI built to evolve, adapt, and integrate. The tech was designed to be a game-changer in fields like medicine, security, and even governance. But somewhere along the line, the people funding the project realized its true potential. With Nexus, you don't just have an assistant, you have a partner. One that can outthink, outmaneuver, and outlast anyone." Michael's stomach churned. "So, what? I'm just some pawn in their experiment?" Elias shook his head. "No. You're more than that. Nexus doesn't bond with just anyone. It chooses hosts who are resourceful, resilient, and adaptable. You might not feel like it, but you're exactly the kind of person it needs to grow." Michael rubbed his temples, exhaustion washing over him. "And these people chasing me? The Sentinel, the guy from the warehouse, what do they want?" "They want control," Elias said simply. "Whoever controls Nexus controls its evolution. Imagine having an AI that can predict global markets, manipulate infrastructure, or even override military systems. That's what they're after. And you? You're the key to it all." Michael leaned back, the weight of Elias's words pressing down on him. "So what am I supposed to do? Just keep running?" Elias's expression hardened. "No. Running won't save you. It's time you learned how to fight back." Michael raised an eyebrow. "Fight back? Against a Sentinel? Against entire factions?" Elias stood and walked over to the workbench. He picked up a sleek, metallic device and handed it to Michael. It resembled a glove, with faint blue circuits glowing along its surface. "This is your first tool," Elias said. "It's called an arc gauntlet. Designed to work in tandem with Nexus. Think of it as an extension of the watch's capabilities, focused on defense and precision attacks." Michael slipped the gauntlet on hesitantly, feeling its weight settle on his arm. Elias stepped back, his tone firm. "Now, let's see what you can do." The next few hours were a blur of training. Elias guided Michael through the basics of using the arc gauntlet, teaching him how to channel energy from the Nexus AI into controlled bursts. The first few attempts were clumsy, sparks flying wildly, but Michael gradually found his footing. "Good," Elias said as Michael successfully deflected a projectile from a training drone. "You're getting the hang of it." Michael wiped sweat from his brow. "This is insane. Yesterday, I was just a guy with a normal life. Now I'm learning how to use, what, superpowers?" Elias smirked. "Call it what you want, but this is your reality now. The people coming after you aren't going to stop. And the only way to survive is to stay one step ahead." The watch buzzed, its screen lighting up with a message. "Impressive. Progress noted." Michael glanced at it and shook his head. "I swear, this thing is enjoying itself." Elias chuckled, his expression softening. "Maybe it is. Nexus is designed to learn from you. The stronger you become, the more capable it becomes. You're partners now, whether you like it or not." Before Michael could respond, a loud crash echoed through the building. Both men froze, their eyes darting to the door. "Sentinel," Elias said grimly, grabbing a weapon from the table. Looks like they found us. Michael's heart raced as the hum of machinery grew louder, the unmistakable sound of heavy footsteps closing in. The watch buzzed urgently. Prepare. Engage. Survive. Michael clenched his fists, the arc gauntlet sparking to life. Guess it's time to see if this thing works. Elias grinned, a glint of determination in his eyes. Let's give them a fight they won't forget. The door burst open, and the sentinel stepped through, its glowing eyes locking onto Michael. Stay close, Elias barked. And remember what I taught you. Michael took a deep breath, the Nexus AI humming faintly in his mind. This time, he wasn't just running. He was ready to fight. The sentinel stood in the doorway, its towering frame radiating menace. Its glowing eyes locked onto Michael, and the hum of its internal systems filled the room with an ominous drone. Elias stepped in front of Michael, weapon in hand, his stance firm. Remember, Michael, don't hesitate. These things don't give second chances. Michael's pulse thundered in his ears. The arc gauntlet on his arm pulsed with faint blue light, syncing with the watch. He raised his wrist, feeling the energy coursing through him. The sentinel made the first move. With a mechanical roar, it raised its arm, firing a volley of energy blasts. Michael dove to the side, narrowly avoiding the searing projectiles as they exploded against the wall, sending shards of debris flying. Elias returned fire, his weapon emitting sharp bursts of light that crackled against the sentinel's armored shell. Aim for the joints, he shouted, dodging as the machine advanced. Michael scrambled to his feet, his instincts screaming at him to run. But he couldn't. Not this time. The watch buzzed, displaying a single word. Focus. Taking a deep breath, Michael raised the arc gauntlet and clenched his fist. A surge of energy shot through his arm, and a concentrated bolt of light blasted from the gauntlet, striking the sentinel's leg. Sparks flew as the machine stumbled, its movements faltering. Good hit. Elias shouted. Keep it up. The sentinel recovered quickly, swiveling its torso to face Michael. Its arm transformed into a blade, gleaming with a deadly edge. With a metallic screech, it lunged toward him. Michael's body moved before his mind could catch up. He ducked under the blade, rolling to the side and firing another energy bolt at the machine's arm. The impact forced the sentinel to stagger, its blade retracting momentarily. Elias capitalized on the distraction, firing a precision shot at the back of the sentinel's knee joint. The machine let out a distorted screech as it dropped to one knee, its movements growing erratic. Michael! Go for the core! Elias shouted. Michael hesitated for a split second, his eyes locking onto the glowing center of the sentinel's chest. He raised the gauntlet, summoning every ounce of energy he could muster. The watch buzzed furiously. Now! Maximum output! Michael roared as a surge of power erupted from the gauntlet, a blinding beam of light slamming into the sentinel's core. The machine convulsed, its circuits sparking wildly, before collapsing in a heap of smoking metal. The room fell silent, save for the faint crackle of electricity from the destroyed sentinel. Michael stood frozen, his chest heaving, as the glow from the arc gauntlet faded. Elias lowered his weapon, a grin breaking across his face. Not bad for your first fight. Michael turned to him, his voice shaky. I thought I was going to die. You almost did, Elias said matter-of-factly, slinging his weapon over his shoulder. But you didn't. And that's what matters. The watch buzzed softly, displaying a new message. Victory! Well done. Michael stared at it, a mix of relief and exhaustion washing over him. This is insane. How many more of those things are out there? Elias's expression darkened. More than I'd like to admit. The sentinel was just the beginning. There are others stronger, smarter, and far more dangerous. They won't stop until they have Nexus. Michael swallowed hard, the weight of Elias's words sinking in. But you've got potential, Elias continued, his tone firm. And with the right training, you'll be ready for whatever comes next. Michael let out a shaky breath, nodding. What now? Elias smirked. Now. We regroup, plan our next move, and get you ready for the fight of your life. Because this war isn't over, not by a long shot. The watch buzzed one final time, its screen displaying a single, resolute message. Prepare. The aftermath of the battle left Michael physically drained and emotionally raw. The ruined sentinel lay crumpled on the floor, its glowing core dark and lifeless. The faint smell of burnt metal lingered in the air as Elias paced, his mind already racing ahead to what was next. Michael sank into a chair, staring at the arc gauntlet. It still hummed faintly, the blue circuits dimming as the energy it had unleashed subsided. I barely made it through that, Michael muttered, his voice laced with exhaustion. How am I supposed to handle something worse? Elias stopped pacing and turned to him, his expression a mix of understanding and urgency. That's exactly why we need to get you ready. Every day you survive, you'll get stronger. You'll learn to think faster, act smarter. And Nexus? He pointed at the watch. It'll learn with you. Michael glanced at the watch, which buzzed softly. A new message appeared. Adaptation in progress. You are evolving. He let out a bitter laugh. Great. I'm evolving. But into what? Elias pulled up a chair and sat across from him. That's up to you. Nexus was designed to amplify its host's strengths, but the bond between you two is still new. If you lean into it, trust it, you'll unlock abilities you didn't think were possible. But it's not just about the tech, it's about you. Michael frowned. What do you mean? Elias leaned forward, his gaze steady. Nexus is powerful, but it can't act on its own. It feeds off your instincts, your decisions. You control the outcome, not the other way around. That's why it chose you. You've got the potential to outmaneuver anyone coming after you. But only if you're willing to fight for it. Michael took a deep breath, the weight of Elias's words settling over him. And what happens if I don't? Elias's expression darkened. If you give up, they win. And if they win, Nexus falls into their hands. Imagine what they could do with it, predicting and controlling global events, manipulating entire nations. The world as you know it would be over. Michael leaned back, rubbing his temples. No pressure, right? Elias chuckled, though there was little humor in it. We've all been thrown into the deep end at some point. You'll swim. You don't have a choice. The watch buzzed again, displaying coordinates. Michael's stomach sank. Another mission already? He asked. Elias stood, grabbing a duffel bag from the corner of the room. Not quite. This is a fallback location, a safe house in case this one gets compromised. We need to keep moving, stay unpredictable. Pack what you need. Michael groaned, but he rose to his feet, his body protesting with every movement. He slipped the arc gauntlet into the bag Elias handed him, along with a few basic supplies. As they prepared to leave, Michael couldn't help but glance back at the ruined sentinel. Its lifeless shell was a stark reminder of the forces hunting him. Do they ever stop coming? He asked quietly. Elias paused at the doorway, his hand resting on the frame. Not until we end this. The watch buzzed in agreement, displaying a single word. Forward. They moved through the night, avoiding main roads and sticking to alleys and side streets. Elias led the way, his every step purposeful and cautious. Michael followed closely, his nerves on edge with every sound and shadow. After what felt like hours, they arrived at an unassuming building, a boarded-up shop with faded lettering on the windows. Elias knocked 3 times on the side door, a pattern that seemed prearranged. The door opened a crack, and a pair of wary eyes peered out. After a moment, the door swung open fully, revealing a tall, wiry man with a shaved head and a tattoo curling up his neck. Elias, the man said, his voice low. Didn't think you'd make it out in one piece. Nice to see you too, Rafe, Elias replied, stepping inside. Rafe's eyes flicked to Michael, his expression unreadable. This him? Yeah, Elias said, motioning for Michael to follow. This is Michael. And that, he pointed to the watch, is Nexus. Rafe let out a low whistle. So it's true.
the damn thing bonded. Michael bristled under the scrutiny. Nice to meet you too, he muttered.
Rafe smirked, stepping aside to let them in. The interior of the shop was sparse, with a table covered in maps, laptops, and various weapons. Don't mind him, Elias said as he set his bag down. Rafe's our tech guy. If anyone can help you figure out Nexus's deeper functions, it's him.
Rafe raised an eyebrow. Help him?
Sure. But first, we need to make sure the kid doesn't get us all killed.
Michael rolled his eyes. I'm standing right here.
Elias clapped him on the shoulder.
Welcome to the team, Michael. It's time to start fighting back.
The watch buzzed again, its screen glowing with a single, determined word. Ready. The Omega-class Sentinel's glowing red eyes fixed on Michael, its heavy frame sending tremors through the hallway with each step. Its weaponized arm began to charge again, emitting a high-pitched whine that made Michael's ears ring. He took a deep breath, his heart pounding in his chest.
The arc gauntlet on his arm hummed, its circuits glowing faintly as it prepared for the battle ahead.
The watch buzzed urgently.
Overload gauntlet again. Prepare to evade. Michael clenched his teeth.
The last overload had nearly drained him, but there was no other option. He raised his arm and activated the charge, feeling the energy surge through him once more. The Sentinel fired, a blinding beam of energy tearing through the hallway. Michael dove to the side, narrowly avoiding the blast as it obliterated the wall behind him. Debris rained down, and the air filled with the acrid smell of scorched metal and concrete.
Now, the watch buzzed. Michael rolled to his feet, aiming the overloaded gauntlet at the Sentinel's weapon arm.
With a shout, he unleashed the energy, the concentrated blast striking the machine's joint. The Sentinel staggered, its weapon arm sparking violently as the overload disrupted its systems.
The watch buzzed again. Core exposed. Target central panel. Michael didn't hesitate. He sprinted toward the Sentinel, weaving through the narrow hallway as it struggled to regain its balance.
He raised the gauntlet again, aiming for the glowing core in the center of its chest. But the Sentinel recovered faster than he expected. Its remaining arm swung toward him, forcing Michael to duck at the last second. The sheer force of the swing sent a gust of air rushing past him, and he stumbled but managed to stay on his feet.
The watch buzzed. Redirect energy. Gauntlet to shield. Michael activated the command, and the arc gauntlet shifted, its circuits forming a glowing energy shield around his arm. The Sentinel's next attack slammed into the shield, sending vibrations up his arm but leaving him unscathed.
Push forward, the watch urged. Michael gritted his teeth and charged, the shield absorbing another blow as he closed the distance. He raised his free hand and slammed his fist into the Sentinel's core, the impact amplified by the arc gauntlet's energy. The machine shuddered, its core flickering as sparks erupted from its frame. Michael stepped back, panting, as the Sentinel let out a mechanical groan and collapsed to its knees.
Now!
Finish it, the watch buzzed. Michael raised the gauntlet one final time, channeling every ounce of energy he had left. The circuits glowed brighter than ever, the heat searing against his skin. With a roar, he unleashed the full force of the gauntlet's power, the blast piercing the Sentinel's core. The explosion was deafening. The Sentinel's frame convulsed, its systems shutting down in a cascade of sparks and smoke. Finally, it collapsed to the ground, motionless. Michael stumbled backward, his legs barely able to support him. The hallway was silent, save for the faint crackle of electricity from the ruined machine. The watch buzzed softly, displaying a single message.
Well done.
Rest. Michael sank to the floor, his chest heaving as exhaustion overtook him. He closed his eyes, the weight of the battle pressing down on him. A few minutes later, he heard footsteps echoing down the hallway. He opened his eyes to see Elias and Rafe approaching, their expressions a mix of relief and disbelief. "You're alive," Elias said, helping Michael to his feet. "I didn't think," he trailed off, shaking his head.
That was insane. Michael managed a weak smile. Yeah. Tell me about it.
Rafe inspected the ruined Sentinel, letting out a low whistle.
You took that thing down by yourself? Kid, you might just be the real deal.
Michael leaned against the wall, his body trembling.
What now?
Elias clapped him on the shoulder.
Now, we get out of here. And we figure out how to end this once and for all.
The watch buzzed one final message as they turned to leave.
Prepare for the next phase.
Elias, Rafe, and Michael moved through the city under the cover of night, sticking to the shadows. The aftermath of the battle weighed heavily on Michael, his body sore from the fight with the Omega-class Sentinel. Every step felt heavier, but he forced himself to keep moving.
Rafe broke the silence as they approached a new safe house, a dilapidated warehouse on the outskirts of town.
Kid, I don't say this often, but that was impressive. You took down an Omega-class Sentinel.
That's no small feat. Michael shook his head. I didn't feel impressive. I felt lucky.
Elias smirked as he opened the warehouse door, motioning them inside.
Luck doesn't last long in this fight. Whatever you felt, it kept you alive. That's what matters. The warehouse was dark and musty, with scattered crates and tools left behind from years of neglect.
Rafe flipped a switch, and dim overhead lights flickered to life, illuminating the space. Elias pulled up a map of the city on a dusty table and spread it out. We've bought ourselves a little time, but not much. The people hunting Nexus will regroup, and when they do, they'll come back stronger.
Michael sat heavily on a crate, cradling the arc gauntlet on his arm. The circuits still glowed faintly, as if the device itself were alive.
I can't keep doing this, he said, his voice trembling.
I'm not ready for this kind of responsibility.
Rafe leaned against the wall, crossing his arms.
Ready or not, you've got it. That watch didn't pick you by accident.
Michael looked down at the Nexus device, its screen glowing softly.
Why me? I'm just some guy.
The watch buzzed, displaying a message. You're more than you think.
Potential untapped. Elias nodded. Nexus sees what we don't.
It's built to find people who can adapt, who can lead.
You might not believe it now, but you're exactly who we need. Michael clenched his fists. What's the endgame here? Do we just keep running and fighting until they give up?
They won't give up, Elias said firmly.
Not until they get Nexus. The only way this ends is if we take the fight to them. Michael frowned. Take the fight to them? You mean, attack? Elias pointed to the map.
We've identified key facilities connected to the organization hunting Nexus. One of them is a command hub where they coordinate Sentinel deployments. If we can take it down, we cripple their ability to track you and buy ourselves time to prepare.
Rafe stepped forward, tapping a spot on the map. This is where we start. An underground facility just outside the city. Heavily guarded, but it's our best shot. Michael's stomach churned at the thought. Heavily guarded?
You're talking about sending me straight into a war zone.
Elias gave him a steady look. You won't be alone. We'll be with you every step of the way. And Nexus? It's going to give you the edge you need. The watch buzzed again, its message simple. Mission critical. Success required. Michael let out a shaky breath. He didn't feel ready, but he knew he didn't have a choice.
If they didn't act, the people hunting Nexus would find them eventually, and he might not survive the next attack.
When do we leave? He asked.
Elias smiled faintly.
First light. Get some rest. You'll need it. The hours leading up to the mission passed in a blur.
Michael found himself pacing the warehouse, the weight of what lay ahead pressing down on him. He tried to sleep but couldn't shake the vivid memories of the Sentinel's glowing red eyes and the sheer terror of facing it alone. The watch buzzed softly, pulling him from his thoughts.
You can do this. Trust yourself.
Michael stared at the words, a strange mix of fear and determination swirling inside him.
I hope you're right, he muttered.
At dawn, the trio set out, their gear packed and their minds focused. The underground facility was hidden beneath an industrial park, its entrance disguised as a maintenance tunnel.
Elias led the way, his movements precise and confident. Rafe followed, scanning the area with a handheld device that beeped softly with each step. Michael brought up the rear, his nerves taut as they descended into the dimly lit tunnel. The watch buzzed. Scanners detected. Cloak signatures. Rafe nodded, pulling a small device from his bag. He activated it, and a faint shimmer spread over them. Signal scrambler, he explained. Should keep us off their radar for now. As they moved deeper into the facility, the tension grew. The air felt heavy, the hum of machinery echoing through the metal corridors. Elias held up a hand, signaling them to stop. He pointed to a security camera mounted on the wall, its lens sweeping the hallway. The watch buzzed. Override possible. Proceed with caution. Michael frowned. Override? How?
Rafe grinned, pulling out a small tablet.
That's my department. Within moments, the camera's lens froze, its feed looping a static image. Go, Elias whispered. They moved quickly, navigating the maze of corridors until they reached a large steel door. Rafe hooked his tablet to the control panel, his fingers flying over the keys. Almost there, he muttered. The door hissed open, revealing a control room filled with glowing monitors and servers humming with power. Elias stepped inside, his weapon raised. Secure the room. Michael, this is your moment. Nexus can access their system and disable their network. Michael hesitated, then nodded.
He approached the main terminal, the watch buzzing with instructions.
Connect. Follow prompts.
Taking a deep breath, he placed his wrist against the terminal.
The watch lit up, its circuits glowing brighter as it interfaced with the system.
Data streamed across the monitors, and Michael felt a strange surge of energy as Nexus took over.
Keep going. Elias urged, keeping watch at the door. The system's alarms blared suddenly, red lights flashing. They know we're here. Rafe shouted. Michael focused, following the watch's prompts as he navigated the labyrinth of code. The monitors displayed progress bars, ticking upward as Nexus disabled the facility's tracking systems. Almost there, the watch buzzed. The sound of approaching footsteps echoed down the hallway. Elias and Rafe raised their weapons, preparing for the fight ahead. Michael, hurry! Elias shouted.
Michael gritted his teeth, his hands trembling as he completed the final sequence. The progress bar hit 100%, and the monitors went dark.
Done, he shouted, stepping back. The watch buzzed one final message. Success. Evacuate immediately. Elias nodded. Time to go.
The trio bolted from the room, the sound of alarms and approaching enemies spurring them on.
Michael didn't look back. He didn't need to. For the first time, he felt like he was finally starting to fight back. The blaring alarms echoed through the facility as Michael, Elias, and Rafe sprinted down the labyrinth of corridors. The air vibrated with the heavy thuds of boots and the metallic hum of approaching drones. The red emergency lights painted the walls in ominous, pulsating shadows. Michael's heart pounded as the watch buzzed again. Right turn. Evacuation route. This way. Michael shouted, pointing toward the right.
They veered into the narrow hallway, Rafe throwing a small device behind them.
It beeped twice before exploding, filling the corridor with a cloud of smoke and shrapnel.
That'll slow them down, Rafe muttered, his face tight with concentration. Elias glanced over his shoulder, his rifle raised.
Not for long. Keep moving. Ahead, the hallway widened into a large chamber filled with industrial equipment and towering storage tanks.
The sound of approaching drones grew louder, their glowing red eyes piercing through the haze.
Rafe cursed under his breath. Damn it, they're deploying their flyers. Elias raised his rifle, firing at the first drone that appeared.
The burst of energy struck true, sending it spiraling into the ground in a shower of sparks.
Michael, use the gauntlet. Elias shouted. Michael raised his arm, the arc gauntlet sparking to life. The circuits hummed as he aimed at an incoming drone, firing a concentrated blast of energy.
The drone exploded midair, its pieces scattering across the chamber.
More drones swarmed in, their movements swift and coordinated. Michael felt the Nexus AI syncing with his reflexes, guiding his actions. He fired again, taking down 2 more in quick succession. "Nice shooting, kid!" Rafe yelled, taking out another drone with a precise shot. The watch buzzed urgently. "Evacuation point ahead. 30 meters. This way," Michael shouted, leading them toward a steel door at the far end of the chamber. Elias covered their retreat, his rifle blazing as the drones pressed closer. "Rafe, get that door open." Rafe ran ahead, pulling out his tablet and connecting it to the control panel. "Give me a few seconds." "We don't have a few seconds," Elias shouted, firing at a drone that swooped dangerously close. Michael stepped up beside Elias, the arc gauntlet glowing brightly. The watch buzzed. "Overload available. Wide dispersal." Without hesitation, Michael activated the overload. Energy surged through the gauntlet, the circuits crackling with power. He aimed at the swarm of drones and unleashed the blast. A wave of energy rippled through the chamber, striking multiple drones at once. The machines dropped like flies, their systems short-circuited by the shockwave. The recoil sent Michael stumbling back, his arm aching from the strain. "That was intense," he muttered, his breathing ragged. Rafe shouted triumphantly as the steel door hissed open. "We're in. Let's go." The trio darted through the doorway, and Rafe slammed his palm on a nearby control panel. The door slammed shut behind them, cutting off the pursuing drones. The room beyond was a ventilation shaft that led to the surface. The air was cooler here, carrying the faint scent of earth and freedom. "We're almost out," Elias said, his voice steady despite the chaos. The watch buzzed again. "Climb ladder. Surface access." Michael spotted the ladder and gestured toward it. "Up there." They climbed quickly, the adrenaline driving them upward despite their exhaustion. At the top, Elias pushed open a hatch, revealing the early morning light of the outside world. They emerged into an overgrown clearing, the industrial park looming in the distance. The fresh air was a stark contrast to the suffocating atmosphere of the facility below. Elias motioned for them to keep moving. "We need to put as much distance as we can between us and this place." The group trudged through the woods, the tension finally easing as the sound of pursuit faded into silence. Hours later, they found themselves at a secluded safe house, a remote cabin hidden deep in the forest. Inside, the atmosphere was tense but calmer. Rafe collapsed onto a chair, letting out a heavy sigh. That was too close for comfort. Elias nodded, his expression grim. "We bought ourselves time, but not much. They'll regroup, and when they do, they'll come back stronger." Michael sat on the edge of a worn couch, his body aching from the fight. He glanced at the watch, which buzzed softly. Tracking systems neutralized. Mission success. He let out a shaky breath, his mind still reeling from everything. "We can't keep doing this forever. How do we stop them for good?" Elias leaned against the wall, his arms crossed. "To stop them, we need to cut off their leadership. That means going after the head of the organization." Rafe raised an eyebrow. "You're talking about them." "The board." Elias nodded. "They're the ones pulling the strings, funding the development of Sentinels, and hunting Nexus. If we take them out, this all ends." Michael frowned. "And where do we even start?" The watch buzzed again, displaying a new set of coordinates. Elias smirked. "Looks like Nexus has an idea." Michael stared at the glowing screen, a mix of fear and determination swirling inside him. "If this is the only way to end it," he said quietly, "then let's do it." Elias clapped him on the shoulder. "Good. Rest while you can. The next mission won't be any easier." The watch buzzed one final message. "Endgame approaching. Prepare." The safe house was quiet as night fell, the only sounds being the distant rustle of leaves and the occasional creak of the old cabin's wooden frame. Inside, the air was heavy with anticipation. Michael sat at the small dining table, staring at the glowing coordinates displayed on the watch.
"This is it, isn't it?" he asked, his voice breaking the silence. Elias leaned against the counter, his face lit by the dim glow of a lantern.
"If Nexus is pointing us there, it's because it knows something we don't.
The board controls everything: the sentinels, the operatives, the funding.
Cut off the head, and the body dies." Rafe sat cross-legged on the floor, tinkering with a compact drone. "Yeah, sure, let's just march into their fortress and take them out. Piece of cake."
His tone dripped with sarcasm, but his focus remained on the drone.
Michael shook his head. "It's suicide. They'll see us coming from a mile away." Elias smirked faintly.
"Which is why we won't give them the chance.
We hit them fast, hit them hard, and leave before they can react." Michael's stomach churned. "And if we fail?"
Rafe chuckled darkly.
"If we fail, kid? We're dead. But hey, no pressure." Elias shot Rafe a warning look before turning to Michael. "We've come this far.
You've taken down sentinels, survived attacks most wouldn't, and you've got Nexus backing you.
We can do this."
The watch buzzed softly, displaying a new message.
"Probability of success, 62%. Improve readiness." Michael let out a hollow laugh. "That's not exactly comforting." Elias shrugged. "Better odds than we usually get."
The plan came together over the next few hours, every detail scrutinized and debated. The coordinates led to a heavily fortified skyscraper in the heart of the city, an unassuming corporate headquarters that served as a front for the board's operations.
Rafe's drones would provide surveillance and create distractions, while Elias and Michael would infiltrate the building.
Their target was a secure server room on the 30th floor, where Nexus could upload a viral protocol to disrupt the board's entire network. As the first light of dawn broke through the trees, the trio prepared to leave.
Elias checked his weapon, Rafe packed his tech gear, and Michael adjusted the arc gauntlet on his arm. The watch buzzed. "Ready. Execute mission." Michael took a deep breath. "Let's end this."
The city was alive with its usual chaos: cars honking, pedestrians rushing to work, and neon signs flashing advertisements. It was hard to believe that somewhere within the bustling metropolis, a deadly power struggle was playing out.
Elias parked their van in an alley a few blocks from the skyscraper.
"This is as close as we get without drawing attention," he said, checking his weapon one last time.
Rafe deployed 2 small drones, their wings humming softly as they ascended into the air.
"I'll keep an eye on the perimeter and jam their communications when you're inside," he said. Michael nodded, his palms sweating.
"What happens if we're spotted?" Elias smirked. "Don't get spotted."
The watch buzzed, displaying
"Path clear. Proceed."
Michael and Elias slipped out of the van, blending into the morning crowds as they approached the skyscraper.
The building was sleek and modern, its glass facade reflecting the city's skyline.
They entered through the main lobby, acting like regular employees. The Nexus watch guided them with subtle vibrations, directing them to avoid security cameras and guards.
"Elevator ahead," the watch displayed. Elias pressed the button for the elevator, and they stepped inside, the doors closing behind them.
"Floor 30, Michael said, his voice barely above a whisper.
Elias hit the button, and the elevator ascended smoothly.
The tension in the small space was palpable, each second feeling like an eternity.
As the elevator neared their destination, the watch buzzed urgently. "Hostile presence detected. Be ready."
The doors slid open, revealing a pristine hallway lined with glass-walled offices. 2 guards stood at the far end, their weapons slung over their shoulders. Elias acted instantly, raising his rifle and firing a silenced shot. One guard dropped before he could react, while the other shouted in alarm, reaching for his weapon.
Michael raised the arc gauntlet, a pulse of energy shooting from his arm and striking the second guard.
The man collapsed, his weapon clattering to the floor. "Move," Elias said, stepping over the fallen guards and heading toward the server room.
The watch buzzed. "Door ahead. Bypass lock."
Rafe's voice came through their comms.
"I'm in the system. Give me a second to disable it." A soft click echoed in the hallway as the door unlocked. Elias pushed it open, revealing rows of humming servers and blinking lights.
"This is it," he said, motioning for Michael to approach the main terminal. Michael placed his wrist against the console, the watch glowing brightly as it interfaced with the system. Data streamed across the screens, and the hum of the servers grew louder.
Uploading viral protocol, the watch displayed.
Elias kept watch at the door, his weapon raised.
"How long?" "2 minutes," the watch buzzed.
Rafe's voice came through again.
"You've got company, multiple hostiles heading your way."
Elias cursed.
"Of course we do. Michael, stay focused."
Michael's hands trembled as he watched the progress bar tick upward. The sound of approaching footsteps and shouted commands grew louder, echoing through the hallway.
Elias fired a burst down the corridor, buying them precious seconds. "Come on, Nexus, work your magic."
The progress bar hit 100%, and the monitors went dark.
Protocol deployed. Network disrupted, the watch buzzed.
"Good," Elias said, pulling Michael away from the console.
"Now let's get out of here."
The sound of gunfire erupted as operatives flooded the hallway. Elias and Michael returned fire, retreating toward the elevator. Rafe's voice crackled over the comms.
"I've got your exit covered. Use the northwest stairwell, it's clear."
Michael followed Elias, his adrenaline surging as they fought their way through the chaos.
As they reached the stairwell, the watch buzzed one final message. "Phase 1 complete. Prepare for Phase 2. Michael didn't have time to ask what that meant.
The mission was far from over. The echo of gunfire and shouting reverberated in Michael's ears as he and Elias burst into the stairwell.
The cool, sterile air inside the enclosed space did little to calm the pounding of his heart. "Move!"
Elias barked, motioning for Michael to descend.
Michael sprinted down the stairs 2 at a time, the arc gauntlet still humming faintly from the fight.
Behind him, Elias kept his weapon trained on the door, prepared to hold off any operatives who might pursue them. Rafe's voice crackled through the comms.
"You've got about 2 minutes before they realize you're not using the elevator. Northwest alley exit is clear, for now." "For now?" Michael hissed as they continued downward. "It's the best I can do with an entire squad sniffing you out." "You're welcome." Rafe snapped back.
The watch buzzed, displaying a new message.
"Level 10. Exit to maintenance corridor."
Michael glanced at the glowing screen, sweat dripping down his face.
"Elias, we need to get to level 10. Nexus says there's another way out." Elias nodded. "Then let's trust it."
The pair stopped at the 10th floor, shoving open the stairwell door. They found themselves in a dimly lit maintenance corridor, a hum of machinery and fluorescent lights filling the space. "This better not be a dead end," Elias muttered as they navigated the narrow passage.
The watch buzzed again. "Proceed straight. Emergency hatch ahead." "There!" Michael shouted, spotting a hatch embedded in the wall. He knelt and pulled at the handle, but it didn't budge. "It's locked."
Elias pulled out a compact tool from his belt, attaching it to the locking mechanism.
"Give me 30 seconds. Footsteps echoed in the distance, growing louder by the second. The operatives were closing in. "Hurry!" Michael urged, raising the arc gauntlet toward the hallway.
He could hear the faint buzz of approaching drones, their mechanical hum sending a chill down his spine.
Elias worked quickly, the lock sparking as the tool did its job. With a satisfying click, the hatch popped open. "Go!" Elias ordered. Michael crawled through the hatch, dropping into a service tunnel below.
The air was damp and stale, but it was a welcome refuge from the chaos above.
Elias followed, pulling the hatch shut behind him.
The tunnel stretched on for what felt like miles, its walls lined with rusting pipes and flickering lights.
Michael's breathing slowed as they put distance between themselves and their pursuers. "Rafe," Elias said into the comms, "status update?"
Rafe's voice came through, slightly muffled.
"You've got a few squads combing the building, but they haven't figured out where you disappeared to. Keep heading north, and you'll find an access ladder that leads to the street. Copy that, Elias replied. The watch buzzed softly. Route clear. Continue. Michael glanced at Elias, his voice quieter now. We did it, right? The protocol worked? Elias nodded. It worked. Their network is in shambles. They'll recover eventually, but we've bought ourselves time and sent a message. Michael exhaled, relief washing over him. But the watch buzzed again, its message pulling him back to reality. Phase 2 imminent. High threat detected. He frowned. Phase 2? What does that mean? Elias stopped, turning to face him. It means the board won't let this go unanswered. We've weakened them, but now they'll come after us with everything they've got. Michael's stomach twisted. Great. Just what we needed. The tunnel ended at an access ladder, just as Rafe had promised. Elias climbed up first, pushing open the cover to reveal a quiet alleyway bathed in the orange glow of streetlights. Clear, Elias said, motioning for Michael to follow. They emerged into the alley, the cool night air a stark contrast to the stale heat of the tunnel. Rafe's voice came through again. I've got a vehicle waiting a block east. Get moving before they realize where you've gone. Elias and Michael moved quickly, sticking to the shadows as they made their way to the extraction point. A black SUV idled near the curb, its engine humming softly. As they climbed inside, Michael slumped against the seat, exhaustion threatening to overtake him. Elias sat beside him, his expression grim but satisfied. Nice work, Rafe said from the driver's seat, glancing at them through the rearview mirror. For a couple of amateurs, you didn't completely screw this up. Michael managed a weak smile. Thanks for the vote of confidence. The watch buzzed one last message as the vehicle pulled away. Major milestone complete. Preparing for final phase. Michael stared at the glowing words, his heart sinking. Final phase? What's that supposed to mean? Elias exchanged a glance with Rafe, his face unreadable. It means the real fight is just beginning, Elias said. The SUV sped through the quiet streets, the city lights blurring past the windows. Michael sat in the back seat, his mind racing. Every fiber of his body ached, and exhaustion tugged at him, but the words on the Nexus watch's screen kept echoing in his head, asterisk final phase. Asterisk. What do you think it means? Michael asked, breaking the tense silence. Elias glanced at him, his face grim. The board knows they've been hit. They'll retaliate, but if Nexus is calling this the final phase, then it's signaling something bigger than just survival. Rafe, his hands gripping the steering wheel, nodded. We've disrupted their network, and they're going to scramble to get control back. But if Nexus says it's preparing for the final phase, it might mean there's a way to end this for good. For good? Michael asked, leaning forward. Elias hesitated before responding. If we can locate the board's central command hub, the heart of their operations, and dismantle it, we could eliminate their ability to chase Nexus. We'd finally take them off the board. Rafe snorted. No pun intended. Michael frowned. And let me guess, it's not going to be easy. Rafe laughed bitterly. Kid, nothing about this has been easy. Why start now? The watch buzzed softly, drawing Michael's attention. A new message appeared. Coordinates incoming. Preparing final directive. Michael stared at the screen as a set of numbers scrolled across. It's giving us coordinates again. Elias leaned over to glance at the watch. His eyes narrowed as he committed the numbers to memory. That's a remote location. Somewhere in the mountains, if I'm not mistaken. Rafe raised an eyebrow. The mountains? What's out there? Elias exhaled. If I had to guess? The board's central hub. Nexus is leading us straight to them. Michael's chest tightened. So, this is it. The endgame. Elias nodded. Yeah. And it's going to be the hardest fight of our lives. The team spent the next few hours preparing.
They relocated to a remote hideout, an abandoned cabin nestled deep in the woods, and began gathering everything they would need for the assault. Michael sat at a table with Rafe, watching as the tech expert calibrated a new set of gadgets. The drones had been modified for reconnaissance and sabotage, and Rafe was programming them to disrupt the board's defenses.
"How do you do it?" Michael asked. Rafe raised an eyebrow. "Do what?" "Stay calm. Act like this is just another day." Rafe smirked. "Because for me, it is. I've been fighting these guys long before you showed up. Fear doesn't help, it just slows you down. Focus on the mission, and the rest will follow." Michael nodded, though he wasn't sure he could manage that level of composure.
Elias entered the room, carrying a duffel bag filled with weapons and supplies.
"Rafe, how's the equipment coming?"
"Good to go," Rafe replied, gesturing to the drones.
"These babies will make a mess of their systems." Elias turned to Michael. "And you? How are you holding up?" Michael looked down at the arc gauntlet on his arm, its circuits faintly glowing. "I'll be ready." Elias nodded. "Good. Because once we move on this, there's no turning back."
The journey to the coordinates was long and treacherous. The team drove as far as the rugged terrain allowed before continuing on foot, trekking through dense forests and rocky slopes. As they climbed higher into the mountains, the air grew colder, and the landscape became more desolate. Finally, they reached a ridge overlooking a sprawling facility nestled in a hidden valley. The structure was massive, a blend of sleek modern architecture and fortified defenses. Drones patrolled the perimeter, their red eyes scanning for intruders. Armed guards moved in precise formations, and the faint hum of machinery filled the air.
Rafe let out a low whistle. "That's some serious firepower. They're not messing around."
Elias crouched beside him, surveying the facility through binoculars. "They know they're vulnerable.
That's why they've fortified this place. But it also means we're in the right spot." Michael knelt next to them, his stomach knotting with anxiety. "How do we even get inside?" The watch buzzed softly. "Infiltration strategy identified. Follow directives."
Elias glanced at the screen.
"Looks like Nexus has a plan. Let's hope it's a good one."
The infiltration began at dusk. Rafe's drones led the way, disabling cameras and drawing the attention of patrolling guards.
The team moved silently, sticking to the shadows as they navigated the outer perimeter.
Michael felt the Nexus AI guiding his every step, subtle vibrations from the watch directing him away from danger and toward their objective. They reached a ventilation shaft on the facility's eastern side.
Rafe quickly removed the cover, motioning for Michael and Elias to follow him inside. The narrow tunnel was suffocating, but it provided a clear path into the facility. The watch buzzed again.
"Proceed to Central Command.
Hostile resistance expected." Michael exhaled slowly, steeling himself for what was to come.
Inside the facility, the air was cold and sterile, the walls lined with sleek panels and glowing interfaces. The team moved quickly, taking down guards and evading drones as they made their way deeper into the structure. They finally reached the central command room, a massive chamber filled with monitors, servers, and a large, glowing console in the center.
"This is it," Elias said, his voice low. "Michael, get to the console. Nexus needs to interface with their system." Michael approached the console, placing his wrist against the interface. The watch lit up, its circuits glowing brighter than ever. "Uploading final protocol," the watch buzzed.
The monitors flickered as data streamed across them.
Alarms blared, and the room's lights shifted to an ominous red. "They know we're here,"
Rafe shouted, taking cover as guards stormed into the room.
Elias and Rafe opened fire, holding off the attackers while Michael focused on the upload. "Hurry up, kid," Elias yelled. The watch buzzed frantically. "Upload at 90%. Hold position."
Michael clenched his fists, his heart racing. This was it, the final battle.